there was like 5 feet.
I bet that was 5 feet.
Yeah. It was over top of the state bridge. So yeah, I mean it wiped us out, but I mean for us, as diversified as we are, it kind of hit not an awful. I mean it you know it's always bad, but if you're gonna have it, it kind of hit right there in August where we were already like looking to transplant out in September and everything and push forward. So I mean it was awful, but you know it would have been worse if it had been like a month earlier. So, but yeah. So this is us. You know, this is us. This is where we're at. Yeah.
So do you in production practice are you using plasticulture?
On our
I look like I saw some. That's why I was
yeah,
asking.
tomatoes, peppers, eggplant. We do, and squash and cucumbers. Yeah.
Organic?
We're not certified.
Okay.
But yeah.
So I mostly want everybody to see this right here too. And this is current. Look how much water is going down through there. And as we go across the bridge, look down there, you can see how it's affected on the plants here. So this is just from last week, right?
Last week, yeah. We got 9 inches last week.
I got 5, and it's the highest it's ever gone on my little park farm. So did it come out last week?
It might have gone over the top of that, but
just a little bit.
But everything out in the field.
Well, just to see how high the water came up, and it's really important. You see how the sticks over here around this butternut walnut or black walnut tree is up there?
Yeah.
You see how much? That's how high the water got. And of course, it was a kind of a bad rain last week, but we're having more and more heavy rains quick than I've ever seen in my growing up here for generations in my family, especially in I'm down in on this side of the Appalachian Escarpment. You're on the other side, and so it reacts both differently. Even up toward highlands, there's rush rains that come into like 4 and 5 inches in an hour.
In an hour,
And that's what we're
like
really
we'll get like 8
about.
inches in like 2 hours sometimes.
Yeah, last year during that flood time,
we had 140 inches.
9.5, I think, just that same time period when the Haywood County flood hit.
Yeah.
Or the whole area flooded in that area there. Anyway, anybody got any questions for the farmer? Then we'll head back in and chat for a while.
I do.
Yeah.
So what kind of nutrient management have you done in kind of response to storm? And you do soil tests and all that to figure out what you want?
We've been doing soil tests, and we had who's the agronomist guy? Forget his name. Chris Lynn. Yeah, and then we've just been using we've been like trucking in chicken manure like semi from Michigan. Is what we do for fertilizer. It's like it's pelleted. That to his recommendation, so, which was like it was a couple, I don't know, 2 or 3 semis this year as opposed to 1.5.
So what'd you lose?
I don't really know. That's a good question. I mean, he was just like, I mean, like we kind of just like our I feel like maybe what was lowest was the potassium, but I'm not positive. But that was kind of like, we just
That's probably true with chicken There's a couple collard growers that I've worked with back in my home county that replaced almost all of their nutrients with chicken liver except for potassium.
You notice anything weird this year? Disease or?
We haven't seen any like weird disease, not yet, but the weeds are out there, and like these weird bands. We've been fighting them so hard.
And by him using chicken liver, when we go through the lecture, you'll see that's probably a really good mitigation for a flooded field.
Oh, okay.
It's really good to get that organic matter, get that mycorrhiza, that microbiome back real quick, and that's one way to do that. We'll get into all that technical shit in a few minutes.
I have a question. Is your infrastructure up here anywhere else damaged significantly?
We were pretty all right. I mean, we got lucky, like it was on the lower end of this greenhouse, but those hoop houses, like just didn't have flowing water. It had some like
standing water,
a little bit, but like we got lucky there, and then down the road, You know, I mean, it washed out a bridge, you know, but we had gotten everything off the creeks. And, yeah.
Did you do anything to mitigate in your hoop houses, your greenhouses? Or did you use the chicken litter in there too as fertility?
Oh, in the hoop houses, like it just didn't get in there bad.
Okay.
In the greenhouse, everything, you know, like in that greenhouse, everything's on the benches anyways. So, but yeah, we
You're not
haven't-
growing in the soil. In there.
Right. We weren't going in the soil. So
That's one of the issues.
yeah.
I've got another question. Say like this time last year, maybe earlier, say like January of last year, you had the foresight, you knew that was going to happen.
What would we do?
What,
different?
or like maybe what kind of crop would you double down on, or like what kind of strategy would you use in terms of crop planning?
I mean, God, I mean, I feel like every time that I've been like sure of anything, like in life, whatever I've like pivoted to has been like the absolute wrong way to go. So, like, I mean, just like honestly, I'm just like, anytime that I try to be like, oh, I'm gonna like see ahead, I'm fucked.
Yeah.
I guess another way to frame it would be, after the flood, what crop did y'all have that you were like, thank God we had this,
Oh,
you know?
yeah. I mean, well, I mean, like,
to get some cash flow. Losses of
right.
the
I mean, you know,
I'm assuming.
the flood was like, okay, those hoop houses, like, you can flip them quick, you can do stuff quick in them, like, that's something to, like, think about in the future. You know, like, there's definitely crops that, like, we don't put in stuff that's, like, more likely to flood. Like, we depend, like, heavily, like, on our garlic. We grow about, like, you know, like, I don't know, 3/4 of an acre of garlic. So it's, like, it's a lot for us, and so we don't put that in places that
Flood.
yeah, like you know, like I mean, all of our stuff is gonna flood, but only like 75% of it usually when it really comes up.
Yeah.
And that's real important. Remember that.
But you know, yeah, you know, our you know, like we're diverse, which means we're really inefficient, but it's also like we've gotten knocked down by all kinds of different stuff through the years to where our diversity makes it a little bit easier for us to come back, but at the same time it kind of holds us down because we're so inefficient and we're not like making good money. So yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
Well, market gardens are that way anyway. You've got so much to cover.
Yeah. I did not answer that question.
You did pretty good.
Yeah.
Is there anything you're going to do different than you did before you got flooded last year?
I mean, you know, I think we're like a little bit like trimming, like thinking about trimming the fat of like, you know, some of the stuff that we do that we know that we're not making money on, but like we like enjoy doing, or you know, like we've got like, you know, wheat that we combine out there, and it's fun, it's cool, but it's like, okay, you know, like, you know, we've just kind of been like, okay, there's some of this stuff that we have in our operation that we kind of just need to like cut out slowly.
Yeah.
And that's, let me rebuke that just a little bit. I think that's really great to have that in a market garden. We call those lost leaders, where you really have a diversity. You know, you're appealing to this massive amount of audience that likes the local farm. So sometimes, you know, I have growers that are growing things that really aren't that profitable. They barely break even with the inputs if you set that off to a side. But if that farmer didn't have that, you know, would it make him different than the other farmers?
So to differentiate. Yeah. Do you sell that week to anybody?
I mean, Dave Bauer is you know.
On Sparrow?
Yeah, and I mean, it's fine, it's good, you know. But I mean, and like it's good. Like we'll bale the straw, and that straw, like you know, it's hard to come by organic straw and stuff like that. So that side of it's good, but like our busiest time is like June, early July, you know, June, July, and that's like when you're like, oh, I'm gonna take 2 afternoons and sit on a fucking
Combine.
1950s combine, and like when we like our money
And
is
half of it lodged or
yeah,
something.
exactly. Our money's somewhere else, so you know, like it's a thought process. But I mean, it's yeah. So, and it does lodge because like we're growing an heirloom variety that's like 5 to 6 feet tall. You know, it's just like so.
Totally get that. Any other questions? We'll get out of time.
What are you producing here? Like what are in these fields?
So all of these fields we've got in sun hemp and Sudan grass and cowpea in cover crop. And we actually had it in cover crop last year, and it was a big, beautiful cover crop, and we were like, okay, we'll use that next year. And I came through and I bush hogged it all, mowed it down, and then the flood came in, it took all of it and sent it down the creek, and I was like, well, I wonder if we did any good at all, and so maybe we'll just do it again. So that's why it's in cover
That's what
crop.
I would have recommended him to do. To reclaim the field. The microbiome will come right back with that mix you've got there.
Okay, yeah.
I mean, the cover crop is probably the number one thing a small farmer could do, to really mitigate the issues and plant sooner. You could do part of the season with a cover crop. If it happens in midsummer, put a cover crop in. And you probably had a lot left over from that flood taking it that didn't make that much of an effect in the soil.
We got really lucky as far as like taking anything away. You know, like everything was either in weeds or in cover crop or.
And weeds are great, y'all, when it comes to flooding. They'll put that microbiome back just like it would a cover crop.
Yeah.
The problem we have with a lot of flooding, like here, he already had stuff in him that left. If there's a soil bear at one time and it brings a bunch of soil on top, we'll talk about that when we get in there, and how do you mitigate that?
Okay.
How do you deal with that kind of stuff?
What do you have in the plastic?
In the tunnels, we're going to be putting tomatoes in there. We've got some squash and herbs. Piper, what else is in there? Yeah.
In ground ring, in containers.
In the ground.
In the ground. We'll talk about that if they flood in that too. Okay.
Yeah, that was a good example. Tiger and Max. Like, what do you got in there again? Big picture. What do you call that stuff? Yeah, what are you fun here, man? It's like
My name is Anna Maria, and I'm coming out
To do the pictures.
to do
No,
the
the
interview.
video. The
Yes,
video.
yes.
Okay, nice.
Yeah.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah, you too. I'll see you. I'll see you on Wednesday.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're really excited.
All right, great.
And we're sending. Susie sent a new prompt. She modified some of the questions.
Okay then.
And just to give you a
Heads up,
Yeah,
or knowing
yeah.
what's going on.
Yeah,
All right,
yeah.
I appreciate it.
Yeah. It's cool. I didn't realize you guys were coming up here.
Oh
You
yeah,
drove
yeah,
here?
yeah. I
Yes.
drove here. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's far.
Oh yeah, it's pretty cool. But yeah, it's also learning about soil, so
Yeah.
we need to learn more about it too as well. You know, to keep our soil performing very well.
Yeah.
Listen to everybody's stories. So what happened? All right.
We'll talk for about 30, 45 minutes and then take a break. I think it's pretty intense. I'll start out by, I picked you a resource book with choices of things I like. When David and I decided to do this, I thought, oh, wonderful idea, but it was a lot more challenging to pull together resources. There's just not a lot of resources out there. I didn't realize we don't have good ones at NC State anymore. That's what I'm going to go over first. I think that's really important. And this is probably the hardest presentation I've ever written. Normally I can just get them out of my head and flow. So I'll be using a lot of notes to make sure I answer your questions right. What I did was I just made just 2 or 3 little boards here for us to discuss. And instead of me regurgitating, I did a question-answer thing. So I went through and figured out all these questions I thought you would have as someone that has had a flood problem or someone that's worried about that, which I was probably you're looking at. And that's the approach I took. So when we ask the question, hopefully somebody else will chime up the answer. But I spent probably most of the time doing it, and then I got so excited when I kept searching information that this leaflet right here was almost verbatim to some of the questions I put in. Mine are a little bit different, but I wanted you to have that because I use these answers in there too. But that way you don't have to take note of other things here. So that's your first leaflet. And I'm just kind of go through this on the right side. So you'll have it. These are, the presentation is from these notes right here. And actually in the handout, I'll talk about it in a minute. So this is the first one that's wonderful. It's Q&A. So you can go through there and say, okay, my plants are, flooded, but the top part of them are not flooded, or not got water. What do I do with that? That answers you. Okay. Then the next one, I thought it was wonderful. Our home extension person wrote this, but we don't have a good one for commercial, so I added it. It's really great, a good read. It's for community gardens and school gardens, things like that. A lot of us are small scale, so especially if we're a market garden scale, a lot of these things match very well to that, especially if you're really small scale. So I want you to have that after school. Let me stop right quick. I was going to tell more about myself. Yeah, I think you need to know about me. And some of you don't know me, even though I worked in your county. Most of my career, I was in the Piedmont in Winston-Salem, and I was a commercial fruit and vegetable agent for North Carolina A&T State University for years. I was the salt and pepper shaker. And so it was a wonderful experience to be there, especially for years and years and years. And I left there. Went to Oregon. I decided I needed experience in Oregon. Went out there and spent 6 years as a consultant in small fruits. In the Willamette Valley, from there, just fruit. It's wonderful. Came back. I fruit extension twice, almost 3 times. And then I came back and worked for Wake Forest University for about 4 years, and was their head of horticulture. Did all their landscape designs, all their properties in Europe, everywhere. I was in charge of all those. And then Joseph Belina, with Extension, calls me and convinces me I need to come back to Extension. He wanted experience back in Extension and vegetable production. We've lost a lot of experience. And I came back, and I'm in love because they now gave me a job I love. So I came back up to the mountains because I wanted to get near home. I'm from Murphy, and a lot of family in Haywood, Buncombe, those areas. 10 kids in my mom's family, and 8 in my dad's. So they're all over North Carolina, 6 generations. And I'm really from Brasstown, if you know where Brasstown is. And then after working in Haywood, Buncombe, and Henderson, big vegetable, all 3 of those counties, I did all the larger farms, and then Megan Baker in Buncombe did the small farms. That's probably why I don't know some of those folks. So now I'm doing 39 counties, fruit and vegetable specialist, production. That's all I do is production. I don't do we have entomologists and all that kind of stuff. I'm the one that puts it all together. And then I do alternative crops, unusual vegetables, and woodland botanicals. So I work with a lot of farms out of the region doing their analysis for botanicals. So I work in the ASAP region a lot. And I also am very proud that I'm on the ASAP board, that Veteran Safety Project. So, and if anybody in here has not been affected by flood, raise your hand. So you're all, and this was for people that were affected by flood, so I took that twist. Now we'll get back to this. So,
Craig, I'm not going to slow you down.
Yeah.
Few enough people that we could do like a quick introduction.
Oh, I would love that. That way I know who I'm talking to. Yeah. So start over here.
Hey, I'm Mallory. I'm an ASAP. I'm the evaluation assistant for ASAP, so if you ever get a survey, it's really for me. You already have a survey in your little packet, and it's for me. You can do that.
Please do that. We need that.
Yeah. That's good to see you.
My name's Sarah Minster. I'm one of the newer program coordinators for the Local Food Campaign at ASAP. You probably got emails from me as well, so sorry for all those reminders. But, but yeah.
I'm Sarah Curry from Saturnia Farm in Amos County. We're mostly a nursery, and then we also do pumpkins and garlic and flowers.
I'm going to cut flowers.
David Smiley, Program Manager for ASAP's Local Food Campaign.
Hey y'all, I'm Noah Poulos. I manage Clem's Organic Gardens down in Transylvania. We're in the floodplain, but kind of at a high point, so last year's flood we got a little bit of damage, but it's possible for it to be worse in the future.
I'm Vanna. I'm from Encompass Farm. I'm based in Black Mountain. My farm is super urban. It's a network of 8 sites in downtown Black Mountain. We have just over an acre in production this year, and let's see, because I'm spread over so many sites, they're all geographically close. They're all about 5 minutes apart. So I only have 3 of the sites impacted by flooding, but they were still pretty substantial losses, lost a lot of my winter storage.
I'm Glenda Bishop from Turkey Creek Tomatoes. We're here in Leicester. We're about just across the hill on Eisenhower Road. We have about 35 acres of tomatoes. We're not organic, but we are GAP certified. And,
I'm familiar with your farm.
but we try to take care of the land. This is a 5-generation family farm. And I have 2 great grandsons coming along, and I hope they will keep continuing.
We all hope that. One of my grandkids will like plants, you know.
Yeah,
My children didn't at all.
Well, the one that's 3 and a half, you have to pry him, screaming blood murder off of that tractor. So I'm hoping that's a good sign that he.
Yeah, my grandson called me last week and said, Papa, do I have to work on the blueberries? I hate blueberries. I had bought the blueberry plants, the little ones, for him to work on. You know, he's 7. His mother made him call me, and I said, oh, well, we'll work on something else. Maybe you'll like blackberries. Oh, I like to eat blackberries. Strawberries are fine, too. When he comes with you, I'll make him work on my
We
little farm.
have 9 different tractors. Some are older, and then we have 2 or 3 of the, the bigger ones. Well, of course, he wants to ride in the
biggest one.
Well, but he was in the next biggest one, and he wanted to ride in the biggest one, and my son said, well, you can't do that. Said, one of the tires is bad, and you have to park a certain way, or the tire will go flat. And he said, if we let that tar go flat, said, Papa Jimmy, it's not going to be happy. And he said, well, we better not drive it. Said, we don't want Papa Jimmy to cry.
Thank you.
Hopefully we'll continue on.
I'm Trevor Butler. I live and work here. Just making lunch and sauce on Friday nights, so excited to join.
Yeah, I'm Max, and I've been here since March as well.
I'm Hannah. I went to Clemson for horticulture. I'm a 3rd, 4th, 5th generation farmer. Yeah. But we do, Malcolm's my husband, and we have Yellow Mountain. It's his farm. I'll let him talk about it. I'm with moral support and, whatever I can do to help him, so.
Well, Yellow Mountain Garden, that's the name of our farm. We out of Franklin, North Carolina. We basically do companion farming. We basically going more towards animals and stuff. We when I get back, I'm gonna sign a lease for 7 acres, so we're gonna move more over to cows and goats. And ASAP helped and sponsor part of that to go forward. So we just feel like the area that we in, it rains so much, so we maybe have to diverse part of the 5 acres that we use.
Are you running your animals in the woods, silver pasture?
No, it's just open.
Okay.
It's just open.
There's some money available right now for silver pasture.
Yeah, I heard somebody was telling me about that. But I'll look into it. But yeah, that's all we have going on right now. I'm not gonna talk y'all to death.
My name's Dave Ader. Actually, I live just on the Tennessee, over the Tennessee line. I live on a farm, mostly vegetables, about 20, 25 acres. There's only about maybe 10 in production. Mostly wooded and then some pastures, but some poultry, some sheep, but then mostly vegetables.
Sheep for meat or wool?
Meat.
I'll be on your website, I think.
Now they're cutting the grass. They're lawnmowers.
That's good.
But yeah, happy to be here.
Less gas.
Yeah, right, exactly.
I'm Skipper Russell. I'm out in Haywood County. I was sitting here thinking, listening to everybody else, that we're here to flood meeting. This time last week, we was getting flooded.
Oh my God, I bet y'all were, weren't you? I didn't think about that.
Yep, we had a hailstorm on Saturday, just quickly pulled out the field setting the pepper and it worked on it.
Did it tear them up pretty bad?
Yeah, yeah. And then we had 3.5 inches on Monday and 3.5 on Thursday. And so you just read, what did you get? Cleaned out of the river last August, it got cleaned out. I did most of it went in my field.
I don't remember growing up, but I can tell you we had 3 aunts and one uncle living in Haven County. And I don't remember. It was even rains when I was growing up. It's very spread out.
You probably feel the same way down where you're at there.
It's just a shame that I'm already watering from last week. I'm already watering. I have sandy loam. I have no clay. So by 3 or 4 days, I'm dry again. I'm not doing vegetables like the temple. What are you growing?
Tomatoes and bell
Peppers
pepper,
too? Yeah.
beans, and I did a corn I used to do. Cucumbers.
Hi, I'm Anna Maria, and I work for ASAP as a local food campaign program coordinator.
I'm Chris Sawyer. I own Jake's farm. Jake was my yellow lab. We've been flooded quite a few times. I was a certified organic grower and processor for 15 years, and I'm still stupid enough to be growing. And I've reinvented the farm so many times, I don't know. This is my first year giving out tailgate markets. I just don't have time to put together a tailgate market and take it off the farm. Every hour I have needs to be spent on the farm, right? So until we can educate our customers to come to us, we are like a private grower for one chef in town, and I'm looking for the second chef, and I ain't telling who it is because you might steal my business. This is a great relationship I have with this guy. Just whatever I grow, I ship to him. He never places an order. He writes a new menu every day at 4:30, so he can use whatever I grow.
That's wonderful.
It's working for us. Airbnb took the stress out of farming, so that takes a lot of time off my plate too. But all those, I got a visit several years ago from the U.S. Department of Labor. They put me into my worker and intern program. And one of those guys was packing a gun, the other was wearing a tie, and I found out the hard way that he didn't volunteer on a for-profit business. Despite the fact I've only made a profit 2 years out of 23 years.
They actually showed up on your farm.
They showed up on my farm. Yeah, packing meat. And I just told them I was out of business. And since then, I've never taken an intern or volunteer, but if you don't know the law, you have to 1099 the value of the room and board that you trade. So I quit keeping records 5 years ago, and I like my life a lot better. I can't pass a gap inspection because my dogs are my pest control. That's my line in the sand. I'm not the rest of my life. That's it. You know, if I can't have my dogs keep the deer and the bear out, I'm just not going to sell wholesale. That's all there is to it. I can't put a fence around 11 acres. And that's my story.
He wasn't the only one that got inspected. We had a lot that inspectors now come. We had bigger growers got in trouble too. Everybody that they inspected, I had heard it for years. Hell. Aaron, right?
Yeah. Aaron Greer, my wife Ann and I grow vegetables here for sale at tailgate markets in Nashville and the restaurants in Nashville. And she's really like she's the driving force for sure. So yeah, I'm the one that like agrees to this kind of stuff. She's like, so yeah.
Thanks for having us. Over here. We're introducing and telling a little bit about ourselves.
Nice to meet you. My name is Delia Jovel. I am a member of the Fair People in Henderson County. I thought Tiny Bridge Farm were here because we farm together in the same plot, and we had 2 flooding last year, and we just need to learn how to manage that.
Do you have any hoop houses down there along the creek? I know Tiny Bridge. I didn't realize you were with
They
them.
have, but in the other side of the, they have one, but in their own property. But in the plot where we farm,
This part, yeah.
it's Yes, we have just,
Did that one on the other side get flooded? I'm just interested. A lot of water comes down where you're at there.
to be honest, I'm not sure if their side flood as well.
Yeah, I think it's a little higher maybe.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's
I know where you're
different.
from.
But also because there are a new neighborhood just at the
Right up
side
the
of
road.
the,
Yeah.
that needs all the
A
water.
lot more water. Half that field that they're leasing, if you find another farm, is now development. It's a beautiful
Yes.
bottom land that was taken by this development, so I guess the rest of it eventually will go that way. I hope y'all get it for you.
Yes. And
Yes.
Maria,
Uh-huh.
nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too, Maria. So nice to meet you.
We come in that together. We work for the same, Tierra Fértil Co-op and Henderson County.
So thanks, Pat. You want to introduce your child, or you gonna let her stay in her headphones?
yes, she's my daughter.
We won't point her out there. Well, I used to have a vegetable farm, just for your information. Back in the day, when a lot of y'all weren't born, I had an organic vegetable farm. And today, it's a lot easier to do organics than it was back then. We traveled all the way to Tennessee just to get phosphorus. And we had a really hard time in the 70s to be able to get product. And now there's so much wonderful biopesticides out there. If you've not considered some of those things, a lot of my conventional growers are looking like even you. We're looking at different ways of controlling things economically, and sometimes it's a lot easier to do. I just had a farmer over in Alexander County release some persimmons. I'm just waiting to see how it worked on her peppers for spider mites. So we'll find out in a few days if it's worth.
We've done that before at our greenhouse.
Okay, I'll continue just showing you your resources, and you don't have to follow these. I just want you to have this to take home. That way you've got good information that's of value. And I spent a lot of time picking out these things for you guys. The next one is, there's a lot of guidance documents. Our FDA is the one that is the regulatory agency over flood and food that's been adulterated. And this one here is the guidance for industry on that. I want you to have this one that talks about some of the things we're going to talk about here in a regulatory state. I've made links on the reference sheet I'm going to go over in a minute for a lot of these guidance documents. If you're having an odd situation on your farm, pretty much call me or call somebody in extension, call ASAP, and Dave's going to call me if he don't know the answer. We team together very well with ASAP, extension, and I do. Actually, I need to thank you guys, but they have funded, ASAP and I have funded each other together now for almost 8 or 9 years, I guess, or longer. So we've done these programs together and very successfully has helped Extension actually do a better job in programming. For me, I train agents, so now we're doing a lot more on farm. We got away from that with PowerPoint. And they make fun of me in Extension because I'm the poster board guy. I think poster boards are much better, and sitting on the farm and the atmosphere is much better than being in the classroom. So I do like classrooms, don't get me wrong, but before we make impact. So the next one, I just want you to have that one. South Dakota did a good little write-up that's easy to read on fertility. We're going to talk a lot about soils. I'm going to spend a little more time on soils than anything else. And then Iowa State did one on management considerations. Most all of the flood leaflets you're going to see on universities have actually come out of NC State, especially when it comes to food safety. We wrote them and shared them. Elena Rogers is our food safety person. I've got her documentation in you. I'll talk about her some later. But she's your person to contact if you have any questions. It used to be me, and thank God we've got her now. I'll have to do that too. Yeah. Then I did Texas A&M's got a good one on soil testing. I thought you could look at that, especially if you're using private soil testing. A lot of folks are not using the free MCDA soil testing, especially small farms that like a broader spectrum or a different, way of looking at your soil test. We do I can't pronounce that one. It starts with the H. But there's some other methodologies that people like in soil testing, especially if you're looking at microbiome. And I just want to make a mention, I'm going to talk about microbiome a little bit in here. I'm the most excited person before I retire and kick the bucket. We're actually hiring a PhD microbiome specialist for NC State to be the first university that does that. So hopefully in a few weeks we'll have, it's a lady, I know who's going to get it, but it's going to be on the way. I'm so excited. She's young and I know what she's talking about. Another one is farming after the flood. And I want you to have this one because this one is the Soil Science Society of Agronomy. They have a lot of good information on their website, especially if you're a grain grower as well as a vegetable grower, and dealing with grains, especially if you're doing herb grains like milky oats, those kind of things, if you're into that kind of thing. And then the one from Alabama is probably my favorite. It's really good about what the producers do after flooding. Good read. If you're not going to read anything, read that one. And then we don't talk about in the house and things like that, the safety, but I put a food safety plate sheet in here for you. That's all on the right-hand side. We just tried to, ASAP and I tried to build a reference bank for you each time we do these programs together, so that's the reason for this. And my card is in your packet. I work primarily through the agents. I've spoken to 6 agents today with their problem solving. A lot of times they don't tell you that they're going to call me to help figure out the problem. That's my job to do that, to enhance them. So, but it doesn't matter if you want to bypass your agent, but I'll loop your agent in if I'm working with you as a grower. Some growers I worked with years ago, we just have a good relationship like you and I, and we just talk to each other. And then I'll let the agent know, well, I'll talk to your Skip 3 times this month or whatever. I put together this, and I'm really excited about this. We don't have this in extension, and I think I'm going to publish this and use it. Maybe we can use it through our ASAP literature. This is a list of resources for managing impacts on the farm from floodwater. The things I forgot to put in here that we need to add were the agencies. You know, what agents you need to be contacting, and I'll talk about that a little bit. If I don't, please, when we get on the slides, remind me. Because these small farms, like a lot of you guys, there's not a lot of money out there to help you. And that's what ASAP did quickly through this flood this last time, was able to respond quickly to some of these folks that can't get money that are made for the big dogs, you know, the bigger farms that are out there. So we'll talk about that just a little bit. So I need to add that in. But I went through here and tried to add as much as I could of things that you would think of when you're trying to mitigate or you're trying to prepare yourself for a flood. You know, so that's what this is all about. I even added in here about flood insurance. We have leaflets about, you know, do I get flood insurance? Can I get flood insurance? Flood insurance is not for your farm, but you have buildings on your farm. So that's what you need to be thinking about, even for a small farm. You know, what is that, you know, need, and how to assess that need. Everybody that's on the farm should have a disaster kit. I preached that for years and years and years, so I put a link in here for you to know what kind of disaster kit you need. If you got animals, how are you going to deal with your animals in a disaster, whether it be flooding or whatever. I tried to get you all the things that were in here. There's one in here on farming after the flood that's good. Another one I added was, how do we know, a lot of times when we've had damage, farmers don't have the great contacts. If we're in our county and been there for years, we know who the good contractors are. But how do you pick a good contractor to help you recover from the flood if you've had building damage or even field damage where you've had this big ruts through your field? Who do I get to come level for me that understands the soil itself? Okay, once you have that, the slides I did are I just made you a copy of them if you wanted them up there. And then this is really small, but I want you to know if you just search ASAP local food, you know, helping farmers. These are the staff members of the Appalachian Sustainable Agriculture Project. Y'all all know them, but I wanted you to make sure you had that in your packet. I do that for all my packets. And then I wanted to just spend a little bit of time. I actually called Elena. She couldn't come today, or she would have been here. She helped me with the presentation. Called a couple other folks, and I couldn't be here. That's not a problem. But Elena Rogers is probably the best food safety employee in the nation that I've ever worked with. And I've been around for 42 years in farming. And she gets farming. She's from a farm. You know, she speaks Spanish very well. She's, you know, for our farm workers that we bring up and things like that. So she's just so in tune with small farms as well as large farms. So if you need any kind of questions, don't hesitate to just reach out to her directly. A lot of times she'll call. She need to get out to this farm. I've already talked to him 3 times, and you're not helping him enough or something like that. So we have a good relationship. He gives me a hard time. Well, I got 39 counties. I can't get to Charlotte. You know, you don't have an agent in Charlotte, so I'm running to Charlotte a lot down there. And let me get my notes here so we can speak on that. But, let's just get going because I don't want to keep it too long. So I want to start out. The main thing we want to do when we're having flood is we're worried about our soils. We've built soils for years, and I'm used to running around everywhere, so I'll try to be more still. Y'all guys got to see me. You know, one thing that just happened at the research station is we've been building our vegetable soils for research in all of our fields for about 40-some years. And this past summer, I noticed soil, the truckloads and truckloads of soil that Gaia Herbs is in our land. I just found out 2 weeks ago that they put 4 foot of soil on our bottom land, on 2 of our vegetable fields. So now we're all fighting. So I find that everybody needs to shut up and listen and to mitigate the issues. We've had building that soil for years. But, you know, it's flooded and flooded. We've lost a lot with flooding. We choose what goes there. But what's happened is now we're going to have to start all over. We've got 4 foot of subsoil put over a beautiful bottom land. It's incredibly stupid. Anyway. So even researchers do stupid things. Can't believe they did that. They wanted to do another field, and we all went crazy. Like, no! You know, it's free soil. I was like, I don't care. I don't want free soil. But then, so that's what you deal with also with flooding. You've got someone coming in, which is a bunch of water, throwing water on your land. So, you know, the first thing we talk about is really if you really want to assess your land, think about your land and what's happened to it. And that's why I put this up here. Site selection before it floods. You know, I love that Aaron mentioned down here, he was thinking about where he placed certain things. And that's real important. Like a lot of times we have best soils for tomatoes or bottom land. But tomatoes grow on vines. So situations that we'll talk about, you can actually harvest some of those tomatoes. One of the things we ran into this last flood that devastated Haywood County and some of the surrounding counties were, you know, I went out to kill myself in 5 days just going from farm to farm. They didn't know how to deal with flood problems. Most of your traditional farmers knew what to do, but just marking. So we spent hours marking pumpkin fields. And did you know the insurance companies made us destroy the entire field? Even though we could have sold half of it and recovered most of the inputs. And we were debating whether the insurance was worth, I had to set a pencil down with about 6 or 8 farmers. Is it worth me, you know, saying to hell with the insurance? So you have to, I'm vulgar, so you have to understand that. I'm not to offend you, but it comes out every time when it comes to farming. So it was a very difficult thing to deal with. So that's what we're going to talk about in your site. Know your site. If you haven't picked a site, or like you, Vanna, is that right? If Vanna's thinking about adding another couple of places on there, I've already got 4 that are flooding farming, or having standing water. We're talking about standing water as opposed to flooding to the second. I forget that somewhere. I'll try to say on task. That's what's important, and we don't think about that a lot of times. It's more trying to find land, and oh my gosh, I found some I can rent. I'm going to farm it, and then I'm going to figure out what the problems are with the farming. Sometimes it's worth going on down the road. You know, where you're at, I'm surprised you probably got 3/4 of that field will flood. Is that correct?
Yes.
Is that right? Because I know that water flood that comes down through there. So you have to understand that. So things that we can't recover from in vegetable production or even fruit production, strawberries, you know, do we really want to place them there with what, you know, are you having floods every year? I mean, I'm having floods, you know, on family property that we never had before. Never. It's never flooded in the Cherokee County. That last year it destroyed some, especially up there in Clay County where some of the problems are. Floodwaters can carry chemical and biological contaminants. The problem is we don't know what those are. You know, assessing where your farm is real important, especially if you've done gaps. So if some of you have done gaps, you know, you've got to look at that and see what's happening above you. If there's, you know, a cattle operation above you and that comes into your land, it's definitely going to have E. coli in it. You know, so whatever there's a really high risk for that. But if there's nobody above you, there's nobody above me but just houses. So you know, if I flood, I'm not so worried because I don't have vegetables. But you know, in my particular situation, I wouldn't have that much mitigation problem. The type of crops you're growing, we mentioned that's important. You know, some plants are even being used, vegetable plants, to mitigate heavy metal problems. So is that plant I'm growing one of those that's going to pull up some of these contaminants? You know, even if it's one that's not been affected, if the water came up, that's what we have to look at. What else? A lot of times we don't. If you're one thing that farmers have done that I'm seeing that's a real thing, easy to fix. I'm sorry you can't see me. I'll move up a little bit. Can you see this? Probably don't need it, but I always have to have some kind of visual. Extension people are paper. We're paper. Trees we could recycle. In that, but sometimes, and most of the time, the problems I've had with farmers, bigger farmers I've dealt with, especially in the Piedmont down there, is we have so much crops, and we're trying to control problems on crops, especially in the conventional realm. We'll spray. So if you know that a rain event's coming, we always want to spray our fungicides on apples and fruits. Is that going to be a problem if I spray that pesticide and I know the rain's coming, there's a possibility of flooding? I may contaminate my own fields with something that, that's what you need to be worried about. So make a note of that when you're doing your flood planning. And everybody needs to write down in paper how we're going to deal with these floods. That's really important. What else on the flood water? The biggest I've seen a problem with when we've done testing on floods, most of my work, of course, has been the Piedmont over my career, so I'll think about that sometimes, has been industrial sites. Especially in the rural areas, they have these little industrial complexes that are put around. Be aware of it, you've got that, or parking lots. Parking lot has a lot of petroleum things that come in it. And everything in the world is going to flood into those parking lots, and it's emptied out. And that way, if you know all that, then you can make an informed decision of whether I'm going to sell my produce or not. This time, the FDA wants you to just turn it under. But there are, and we'll talk about that in a minute, what the gray areas are that I deal with all the time. I'm going to go over all of them. What else? Let's talk about the microbiome just a little bit, even though it's up here. Then I'll go back to some of this other nutrient things. I'll get out of my own thing. I'll go over these steps to fertility after flood too. But the microbiome is what all the little critters, the growing things, the biggest part of the microbiome that's important to you as a vegetable producer is the mycorrhiza. The different strands of mycorrhiza, and that's what we're seeing in more and more research. When I was in Oregon, I was doing these, they call me the quack, because I was buying mycorrhiza blends out in the community out of Canada. Big, large spectrums of different ones, because I didn't know what would work, and I was injecting them in old growth trees out there. And the one that we were doing mostly with was white ash. Was done a lot in boulevards, and white ash, gets that dye back on the end. So I got to tell the story. So what happened was I decided that I wanted that contract to take care of all those in that city. Was the company I was working for. So I did. I got a lady to let me take care of 2 trees in the entire city of Eugene, Oregon. And there's that 2 boulevards full of ashes. And then the very next year, adding the mycorrhiza, and I don't know what was good or bad. I just added every damn thing I could think of and injected it. They grew 4 feet. And I got the contract the next year for that, for taking care of all those trees. So the microbiome, the point is very important. It's more important to vegetables than it is to even trees, because we don't understand the symbiotic relationship of the mycorrhizas that are in there. And that's what we do when we're adding that. And a lot of times what happens is we call it a post-flood syndrome. It's a very common name amongst us that are talking about flood problems that I deal with all the time. It's the same thing as if you left a field fallow and didn't allow anything on it for a season. No cover crop, no weeds, you kept plowing it all summer. The microbiome dies. And it's almost a sterile soil. It's like what we're happening with the research station is 4, probably 5 feet if the tree's down. Top subsoil thrown into that field. So we got to build that back. And the easy ways to get that back, I think I put a couple of notes in here that I'm having to talk about it, is colonization. The biggest problem we have when we have a flood in the microbiome is it becomes anaerobic very quickly, and it takes so long for that strata of the soil to dry out. So the microbiome changes to undesirable mycelium that are growing in there really quickly. So we got to get that quick back. You know, like we were talking about down in Aaron's field down here, he already had cover crop in there. That's one of the perfect things to do. Immediately get something growing on the soil if it's okay in there. So we've got to build that back very quickly, even if we spray mycorrhiza on there or put it onto our properties. We did that with blackberries one year over in Henderson County, and everybody kind of laughed at me. I said, we'll save your blackberries if you just listen to the nudge. And it was Mike Pack, you know Mike. And he was the only blackberry producer that had a crop that year. So we sprayed all crap from out west that we were doing out west.
Can't believe they let you do that.
Yeah. But no, it's like kelp. It's what we use. It's a kelp extract, and then sprayed it on the blackberries. They had been damaged by frost. You know, that colonized and pushed all the bad funguses on there. That was so it was legal to do. Okay, the flooding influences available plant nutrients, and phosphorus is a big culprit. You may take the soil test. We talk about soil testing is real important, but the soil test is not going to tell you what's really happening in there. It's going to tell you what's available, and phosphorus can fool us. You know, if you're especially growing sweet corn, as a sweet corn grower, you'll get that, you know, phosphorus deficiency right after a flood. It's just come up a little bit, and you're like, I can harvest this corn. It's not even tasseled yet. I can grow it out. You know, we'll talk about that in a minute too. But you know, that's the things we need to think about. How do we mitigate that? And sometimes we have to go back and add, you know, phosphorus in this. That's one of the biggies. Nitrogen is immediately deficit. It's going to be deficit because the nitrogen is going to be taken up completely. A lot of it's washed away, you know, just with the water. But what's left that if you're a fish, if you're an organic person, you've really added a lot of organic matter to your soils. You've been building your soils with cover crops. You're going to lose a lot of that nitrogen until that starts releasing. And once released, those bad mycorrhizas are growing and taking up that nitrogen. So we have to worry about that. So sometimes it's a good idea to just fallow it with a cover crop for a part of the season to recover very quickly. We'll talk about that in more details in a minute. Any crops that inoculous, that's the mycorrhiza. Anything that's like beans, we normally don't inoculate beans anymore in this area because we have the natural mycorrhizas in the soil and we've grown them year after year. If you're doing any kind of grains, all of those mycorrhizas die quickly. They're gone. As soon as the flood comes in and goes up there, the anaerobic situation kills them. So it's very hard for that crop to recover. So if you're one of those that grow those on the side or any of those grain type crops are problem. What else? Let's start leveling. Well, mitigating. I didn't finish on that. Mitigating would be another thing that's really good is he's been getting is pelletizing. That's absolutely fabulous to put something manure. Throw the manure on it. You know, you're gonna build that really quickly. You know, compost. Compost is usually kind of expensive, but if you're near where you can get, even if you have to buy pelletized manure or something like that, it's the best possible. If I did nothing else, I would do that. You know, if you can't get a cover crop in, even if a cover crop just is in for 2 months, you know, throw some cowpeas. It's in the middle of summer. It hits you in the middle of summer. Just throw seed out there. And with cowpeas, I would actually put some mycorrhiza with it, some inoculant. What else did I miss on that? Talk about oxidation. Once they become aerobic, the soils, I talked about them being anaerobic. I didn't talk about the cycle. What happens is once that water's dried out, which sometimes can take as much as 2 weeks, it becomes aerobic again. So anything we can do to speed that up really helps. Then the mycorrhiza, the microbiome begins to grow back really quickly. And so that's why the cover crop really helps get one on there really quickly. Land leveling is the next thing we get into. And I wrote it down. So it's in one of those handouts, but it's important to know what to do and how much sediment you've got added to your soil. And if it's I always say if it's a few inches, 6 inches or less, incorporate it. And then there's a level of how it builds the microbiome. If it's 6 inches to 24 inches, somewhere in there, for that area, I would say, myself personally, a foot, but it says in the books 24 inches. Then what we do there is we mow or plow it. And you get into there and you literally turn that soil, because if you put sand on your sandy clay loam, it's better to turn it under deep, and then that way you're pulling some of that good microbiome below there, that 8-inch depth or the 10, 12-inch depth. Throw that over, till it back in, and put a cover crop on. That's a really quick way of doing it, especially if you're a small farmer and you've got small plots. You could do one plot differently than another according to what happened on that situation. Our farms are the same way. We got to assess each field how we do that. Does that make sense? If it's more than 2 feet, we recommend removal. You need to go ahead and push that off and get as much of that off as you can. That's a good opportunity to build that berm up to block that water. And with farming, we can do that. It just costs a lot of money. Sometimes we'll do a deterrent. We'll put a dike up to just push the water in a different direction. And there's ways to go through it. If it's massive, you'll need to get the Corps of Engineers. But a little bit of doing that. Sometimes we'll do just a few rows, or put just a small berm up with our plow it in that direction and throw it up on this end. Dig a ditch to let the water go down. We did that at the research station. We put deep ditches all the way up in our fields because we're on that river. And when the flood water comes up, it comes down really quickly. So it doesn't build up and then push up into your field. So it may be that you need to have someone come out and assess your field like you. And you come in where you don't need a ditch, but you're putting a ditch in pretty deep just to allow that water to go down, get an aerobic activity really quickly. It's worth the money to do that. Like we used to do tile drainage to remove water. You're doing an open ditch to remove surface water off your land and your fields a lot quicker. And does your creek field flush pretty good there now, doesn't it?
Yeah, but I have perpendicular dikes.
I thought you
to
did,
slow
yeah.
that water down, and that way it doesn't erode.
And yours are kind of at an angle, aren't they?
Well, they're perpendicular to the.
Straight to the creek? Okay.
Yeah.
That's easy to do. Not easy to do, but it's important to
And
do.
I have several on-purpose holes, so the sediment can collect in those places.
And go down in it, yeah. And that's what you do when we're talking about site selection. Look at that, and then figure out what can I do to change this. It's doing this every year. How can I, it's going to flood, or the deer going to eat this corner, and they'll do the same type of thing you do with water. Makes sense?
We lost a lot of big trees that fell down in the creek that had the potential to really divert the flow of the creek. So we spent most of the spring on
Pulling
getting
those
trees out of the creek.
Thank you for saying that. I'm going to add that to my presentation. When I first got out of college in Caldwell County, that's what I did for 2 years. Is clean up streams on farmland. The Catawba River and some of those rivers in that region were so blocked, the fields were flooding every time it rained on us. It was holding the water back, and the water couldn't go out. So we went in and I wrote a conservation grant. New guy, in my 20s, did that, and it made a difference in the flooding of the farming in that area. Caldwell Burke Basin. Nothing else on land leveling. Now, we've had a site that's flooded. We got to figure out what the problem is, and that's what I deal with. I think I was on the phone till 11 o'clock with some of the farmers in different regions that didn't have agents to help them. Most everybody calls their agent. You got Karen, my God.